Welcome to the Double Your Freelancing podcast. I'm here today with Nicolas Cole. He's the founder of Ship 30 for 30, the largest cohort-based writing course on the internet, Typeshare, the leading platform for digital writing tools and templates, and the new awesome thing, the Premium Ghostwriting Academy, which is an 8-week training program teaching writers how to enter the world of ghostwriting and land high-ticket clients. He is the author of 10 books, including the bestseller, The Art and Business of Online Writing, which today I read, I guess online writing is prequel to this ghostwriting one, yeah? Nice.
Yep.
So I've been, this morning, really diving deep into his latest book, which is The Art and Business of Ghostwriting, which for anyone in the DYF audience, not just writers, I think is a really great read. The end of the book breaks down into pricing and marketing, and I got so many gems that I'm excited to dig into with him today from that book. But to finish the little pimped up social proof at the beginning, his writing has accumulated hundreds of millions of views, and it has been republished in Time, Forbes, Fortune, Business Insider, Inc. magazine, and many more. In 2017, he built the first ghostwriting agency, writing on behalf of 300 plus Silicon Valley investors, founders, and CEOs of publicly traded companies, Grammy-winning musicians, Olympic athletes, and New York Times best-selling authors and speakers. And to date, he's ghostwritten more than 3,000 articles for industry leaders on the internet. So I'm personally really excited to talk to Nicolas Cole /Cole because he's done so many different types of businesses that kind of span the whole spectrum of what I notice people in the DYF community want to do. Most of us either want to grow and stay solo while earning a really highly leveraged income with a lot of freedom, or some of us want to scale agencies, or some of us want to move into products. And he's done all of these exceedingly well. So as a soloist, sounds like he capped out around $300K a year and then grew an agency, which I don't know what, I know is 7 figures, but I don't know what your total revenue got to with the agency.
The height was around $2 million a year.
Okay, nice. And in this interview, I'll be talking to him about what he describes as the place where agencies go to die, which I think you said is 2 to 10 million a year. So that'll be fun to talk about. And he's grown several 7-figure product-based businesses. So lots of really cool stuff. I was telling him a minute ago that this is a classic one where I wish it were a 6-hour interview for me to ask all the questions. So if you want to check out his new book, the easiest way to pull it up is go to dyf.link/ghostwriting book. I was trying to think of what's the quick, easy thing for you to spell. I think it's that, ghostwriting book. Ghost like the ghost, writing like writing, but with a T because you're writing it with a pen, and book like book. And today, the interview is going to flow through basically cold outreach, content marketing, service offerings, pricing, scaling, and community questions. And you might hear that and you might say, Zach, that sounds like a lot of scope for a 90-minute interview, and you'd be absolutely right. So we'll see how we go. So Cole, hello. Long-winded intro.
All good. That was a solid intro, and I'm excited. I think we can cover everything on our list.
Yeah. All right. I highlighted things in green that I was like, all right, you got to make sure to talk to him about this. So I at least have some skimmability here. I think the main thing to establish some context for people that I think will be really I'm really keen to get your take on. So as I understand it, from reading your story in your book and stuff, it sounds like your start as a ghostwriter was really kind of on the back of content marketing, essentially, because you did the Quora stuff. You had the column on, was it Inc?
Inc.
I can't remember.
Yeah, Inc. magazine. Yep.
But what I really loved as I was digging into your book today, I really love your value forward cold outreach strategy. I like how accessible it is, and I like how much sense it makes. Lately, I've been digging through some of Brian Harris's old stuff, and he has something he calls like the Santa Claus technique, which very similarly parallels that approach and stuff. So one thing I'm kind of curious about, that maybe this is a weird place to start the interview, but when you think about your start versus what you'd recommend to someone like in your course, for example, when do you think it makes sense to go after that kind of content marketing approach versus a cold outreach value forward approach?
So awesome question. A lot of the things that we talk about today, I'm going to bring back to some sort of first principle. I'm a very first principles thinker. I'm also a bit of a purist. You know, I grew up playing classical piano. I was a professional World of Warcraft player when I was a teenager. I played hockey all growing up. I wanted to play in the NHL. I'm a very competitive And when I get into something, I obsess over the fundamentals of it, because I've learned in all these different areas of my life, like, you need to understand the fundamentals in order to do the advanced stuff. And so each one of these topics, in some ways, I'm going to have to reground it in a underlying principle. And the first thing to establish with something like that is, like, when does it make sense to do content marketing? At the time, I was one of the first people to actually call it thought leadership, which is kind of interesting. This was 2016, 2017. No one was really doing that. Or cold outreach. So here's the first principle to ground in. All of the best opportunities in life come to people who are already doing that thing well for themselves. So some easy examples, right? If you wanted to become a world-class swimmer, for example, which one would you rather pick? A swim coach or Michael Phelps? You'd way rather sit and spend the day with Michael Phelps, right? If you wanted to become, and then insert any career, it's like you have the people that go, well, I can sell you the thing, or do you want to just talk to the Michael Jordan? Do you want to talk to the person who's crushing it, right? And something that I figured out very early on, and it was a little bit on accident. I started writing on Quora just because my dream was to be a writer, and I was like, I just want to start writing. What I realized early on is that the more that I did the thing for myself, the more people contacted me asking if I could do that thing that I was doing for myself for them, which I think is very different than how most freelancers or aspiring ghostwriters think, which is, I'm not doing the thing for myself, but how do I go sell a client? And if you just ground in the first principle of that, think about what you're actually saying. You're saying, I don't have and then insert whatever the deficit is. I don't have the discipline. I don't have the skill set. I don't have the knowledge. I don't have the time, whatever the excuse or deficit is. I don't do that for myself, but I'd like you to pay me to do it for you. Bottleneck number one, right? And so one of the first things that I always try and explain to other writers is, if you want to go land clients where you write their newsletter, you should have a really great weekly newsletter. If you want to go ghostwrite or create content for someone's Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, you should be creating really great content on your Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, right? If you want to ghostwrite books, you should be writing your own books. And this is one of those little it's a very ironic thing, and most people don't clock onto it, which is the fastest way to get clients is to do the thing yourself, because you are your own best case study. And when you do, as we talk about cold outreach should be gasoline on that fire. Where cold outreach is really difficult is when you're not doing the thing for yourself, and then you go reach out to someone, and then they click on your profile, and you're like, I have 17 followers, I have a blurry profile picture, and I have absolutely nothing to show for, I am not my own case study, right? Well, now cold outreach is very hard.
Yeah, that makes sense. The old cobbler with the dirty shoes or whatever. How do you think it applies to, say, I don't know, a back-end developer or something where there's not as much of an opportunity to do that for yourself?
I think you should then acquire the skill of articulating how you do the thing. So for example, in our program Ship 30 for 30, it's a cohort-based writing program. The whole idea is to teach people how to write and publish content on the internet, learn all the fundamentals. And you do it in a cohort style. There's anywhere from 300 to 800 writers per cohort. And the vast majority of people in there their primary is not they are a writer. They're a backend developer, or they're a coach, or they're a consultant, or they're a nutritionist, right? And they view writing as a vehicle to communicate their knowledge. Right. And so it's the same idea, right? Is even if you're a backend developer, you have to find a way to share with other people, this is how I think about solving problems, or these are my frameworks for creating X. That's what's going to make someone go, oh, well, wow, thanks for explaining that to me. I'd love to work with you.
Yeah, I like that a lot. In the book, you talk about the outcome first, and then the how you get there, which I feel like ties in with the DYFR kind of approach a lot. And that sounds like what you're getting at here is that kind of value positioning versus over positioning the technicals kind of thing.
Yes.
So in drilling you about these questions, I realize we haven't established good context for the people in the audience, because I read the book, so I know your backstory, but nobody else does. So to help get us kind of up to speed through your transition, like between starting your freelance ghostwriting, raising your rates, working with a lot of really cool authors, growing your agency, and then moving into products. That's basically your flow, right? Did I get the
Yep.
sequencing? So maybe you could give us a quick like timeline to catch us all up so that we don't have all this stuff be out of context for people.
Okay, so quick rapid fire timeline. I started writing on the internet when I was 17. I had a really big popular gaming blog as a teenager because I was a pro World of Warcraft player at the time. I studied fiction writing in college, so I have a degree in fiction writing actually, and so I spent a lot of my college years studying literature and, you know, really like the art of writing. Realized that there weren't very many jobs to get as a fiction writer right out of college. So I got a job as an entry-level copywriter at an ad agency downtown Chicago, worked there for 4 years. That was really my introduction to the business world. And because, you know, all my teachers in college had this saying, if you can write fiction, you can write anything. And because I spent so much time in the deep underlying art of writing, by the time I got into the business world and I started writing press releases and things like that, it was a joke. Like it was so easy for me because business writing is a fraction of the difficulty of like picking apart Russian literature, right? And so working at this ad agency really introduced me to how to monetize. You know, it was the first time I learned about marketing, business models. I had a great mentor, and I really learned the agency model. I ended up, by the end of those 4 years, I played every role in the company. I was an entry-level copywriter. I was an account manager. I talked to clients. I sold clients, all sorts of stuff. When I quit, at that time, I was also one of Inc. magazine's most popular writers. So I was one of their top 10 writers at the time. I was a outside contributor, and their model at that time was they would pay contributors per page view. And so I would work all day and then I'd go home and I would write literally an Inc. magazine column every day, 30 days a month, month after month. I was just a machine because my hope was if I generate enough page views, I'll be able to quit my job and then I can spend more time writing. And that's basically what happened. I brought in millions and millions of page views for them. By the time I quit, Inc. was probably paying me 50% of what I was making at a full-time job. And I figured, hey, if I quit my job and I have 8 more hours in a day, I bet I can find a way to monetize my writing even further. So I quit my job. I had like 2 months of runway saved up. You know, I was living in a dumpy studio apartment in Chicago, bet on myself. And about a month in, I landed my first ghostwriting client. And how that came to be was he was reading my work on Quora, and he reached out and said, hey, he was an entrepreneur. He's like, I'm about to publish a book. I'd really love some help publishing the same sorts of things you're doing on Quora, but for me. That was the light bulb moment. I was like, oh, people will pay me to do the thing that I'm doing well for myself. I'm just going to do it for you. So started there. Again, had no idea what to charge. I think the first thing that I charged was about $100 an article, 800-word article. And very quickly, all of a sudden, I then started writing on Quora about how I was helping people do this. I had one client. I was brand new to this, you know, and I just started writing about how I helped other people publish content like this. And I started to notice that who I was attracting was always these entrepreneur, executive type people. So I niched down on that. And I was like, my specialty is working with entrepreneurs and executives to publish. And then I didn't say blogs. I was one of the first people to call it thought leadership pieces. So I was like, to help you publish thought leadership pieces, build authority. $100 an article, $200 an article, $300 an article. By the time I got up to like $500 or $600 an article, I was working. I had a full, stable of clients. I was working harder by myself than I was at my full-time job. And at that point, I was probably making, somewhere in the ballpark of $250,000, $300K a year, just ghostwriting for tons and tons of different people. And almost all of them came from my own writing on Quora.
Mm.
That was what was so
Nice.
mind-blowing about it, was like the more that I wrote about how I helped people in this way, the more people contacted me, the more I used myself as my own case study, the more I converted them. Like if someone reached out to me, the chances of me converting them as a client were like 80, 90% because they were already bought in. They read all my stuff. And then right around that time, I did that for maybe like, it wasn't that long, maybe 8 months, 9 months. And then I went to a very close friend of mine who was in sales at the time. And I told him what I was doing. And he was actually the one who said, wow, we should turn this into an agency. So what if you do the writing? I'll take over talking to the clients, which he was used to. He was in a sales role. He knew how to talk to people. And you and I will do these two roles. And then over time, we're going to hire writers to replace you, and we're going to hire editors to replace me. And then we'll hire salespeople to keep bringing in more and more clients. And over the course of the following 2 years, it went from me and him in his 1-bedroom apartment working to we had over 80 concurrent clients. We had 23 full-time employees. We had a sales team. We were closing anywhere from, 8 to 15 new clients a month. At our height, we did about $2 million in revenue a year. And we worked with, everybody, like really well-known multi-billion-dollar startup founders, Silicon Valley venture capitalists, Olympic athletes, Grammy winners. It was nuts. And at that point, when you shift to the agency model, my own audience, I think, was a great way to get started. That was how I got my first 10, 20, 30 clients. And I would say over time, my writing probably brought in maybe like 10%, 15% of all our total clients. But the other 85% was all cold outreach. So these are people we'd never talked to before. And so we built our whole agency all on cold outreach, and we got very good
Cool.
at it.
And
And
that was the
so
value forward cold outreach style that you talk about in the book?
it was, to be honest, not even. I mean, in a
Mm.
way it was. There's different variations of it, and we can talk about how I would execute it in different ways. But because our agency was growing so fast and we had such a compelling offer, oftentimes we didn't even need to. We would just reach out to people. We'd be like, I know you need this. And we knew how to speak to it really well. And we could just one call close them on the phone over and over and over again. And then did that, just to finish out the timeline, did that for about 2.5 years. And that's where I started to really confront, I've since wrote about it, and I call it the valley of death. The valley of death for agencies is between about $2 million and $10 million in revenue, maybe 8 million-ish. And the reason is because agencies are linear. They're not exponential. So linear in the sense that your revenue is linear and your costs are linear. So every 8 new clients, I had to go hire 2 more full-time employees. There was like an 8-month stretch where we were hiring 2 to 3 full-time employees every month after month for 9 straight months. It was exhausting. And because your costs are so linear, the bigger that your team gets, the more overhead that you're responsible for. Our payroll was, $150K a month or whatever it was. And so that means that your sales engine needs to get more and more powerful because because churn is linear as well. So the bigger the team, the more clients you need to get in the door, and it starts becoming very, very difficult. And once you cross about 2 million, which is like where we started to really feel things get messy and start to break, it's almost like the business turns upside down in that your sales machine needs to get exponentially more powerful, but all of your costs and all of your upside is all linear.
Right.
And so if you're not able to break through that, $2 to 3, 4, $5 million range and really get above the 10 million mark, if you're not able to get there, my takeaway was it's not really worth it, because when we were doing 2 million in revenue, I was making less than what I was making just working for myself because I was pouring so much back into the business.
Right.
And so me and my co-founder had to have a very, come to Jesus moment and be like, what are we doing? Are we really going to get this thing above 10 million? Is that what we want? Is that the type of business we want to run? We decided no. And so we scaled it back, like just made a decision. We fired every person on one day. We fired 23 people on one day. We cut 70 clients in one day. We just scaled the entire thing back, brought it all the way to just, it was us two again. We kept
Wow.
our 8 to 10 most, yeah, it was a very, very challenging decision. This was also like 4 months before the pandemic, which was extremely lucky. And, you know, we did right by everyone. We emptied the bank account and gave as much severance as we could to as many people as we could. And me and my co-founder walked away with like basically nothing, you know, 2.5 years of work. And I think we both walked away with $5,000. Like it was, we got paid in knowledge. We didn't get paid in cash for that whole journey. And,
Question.
yeah.
Why scale all the way down versus scale to say like a $1 million a year turnover or something more comfortable, less at that exponential growth needed from linear inputs kind of thing?
So the honest answer is, I think twofold. One was we were both extremely burnt out. At this point, we had grown so quickly and it was sustained. It was literally 2 straight years of very aggressive growth.
Yeah.
And so, you know, along that way, I ended up in the hospital with shingles. Like this, it really took a toll. And I think both me and my co-founder were just like, we sort of realized that keeping, you know, the difference between 20 employees and 5 employees is you still have employees. And I think that was the predominant feeling of like, in order for us to really regroup after what we just went through,
just burn it all down.
We want 0 employees.
Yeah.
Like we need to take some time, you know,
Yeah.
and that's really the honest answer. And I think we also just didn't know, we didn't have time to reflect on the mistakes that we had made. And so I think our fear was if we scale it back in half, like we still don't really know what to optimize. We didn't know what the mistakes were. We needed like a full reset, you know?
Yeah.
Which is very true for a lot of first-time founders.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you push yourself to the limit and now you're at, or frankly beyond for several years, the limit. You're not going to be in the kind of space to be like, all right, let's put on our problem solving hat and give it another go. You just kind of need the space. Yeah, and it's interesting thinking about this with writing too, because thinking about it with something like, say, a dev agency, there might be some leverage you get through reusability, depending on the type of project and stuff. But I imagine that there's only so much efficiency and leverage you can bring to a writing process where ultimately you need to be producing unique, different content. You can't be reusing. It's not like you can reuse the same first paragraph for every client or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that point is really important. And it's why, you know, after we scaled everything back and I really gave myself the time to reflect and go, okay, you know, what did we do well? What did we do wrong? And where I've landed is, especially with something like writing, because you're right, development, if you're creating an app, there's a lot that you can reuse over and over and over again. When it comes to writing, what's interesting is that the bottleneck usually is not your capacity or your ability to create efficiencies. Your bottleneck is the subjectivity of the client. So especially with writing, you know, if you create a piece, the bottleneck is, do they like it or not? And that's a very difficult thing to solve for. And that's what made scaling so difficult, is like, if you have 80 concurrent clients and you have 40 of them at any given time going, no, I don't want to say it that way. Like the inefficiencies compound very quickly. And that's why I'm such a big believer now in, if you're going to go the writing route, either as an individual or an agency, either way, the best place to be is premium boutique. Like if I could do it over again, I would have not scaled it to 20 plus employees. I would have kept it at 5 at most, and I would have just kept raising the rates.
And I think in the book you said like 500K to $1 billion is like the target for premium boutique. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. If you're right in that $500,000 to $1 million range and you have a couple contractors, or you have 2, 3, 4 full-time employees, and you're taking home anywhere from, you know, 3, 4, 500K in profit yourself as the owner, like that's the place to be. But when we were doing 2 million in revenue, I was literally making like 80 grand a year. Like it was not worth the effort.
Yeah. And so you scaled back, you had some time and some space. And then did you start Ship 30 after that, or did you start it while you were still in the agency? I don't know the next steps of the story.
So yeah, me and my co-founder kept about 8 clients. We did that to pay our bills through the pandemic, so it was fine. And it was very low effort. Like at that point, I had become so proficient at ghostwriting articles that I could literally ghostwrite for like 2 hours a day and be done. And so my
Nice.
pandemic experience was my chance to really decompress. I worked just enough to pay my bills, and all the
Hmm.
rest of the time I like watched TV and hung out with my fiance and gave myself time to rest. And um as so I didn't actually start Ship 30. So as time went on, another guy who is my business partner in Ship 30, his name's Dickie Bush, he started it. And
Hmm.
I saw what he was doing on Twitter, and we randomly got connected through a mutual friend. And I saw what he was doing, and I was like, wow, this is really interesting, a writing challenge. And I knew that it was gonna, all the people in that I knew were going to need all of the things that I have learned over the past 8 years writing on the internet. And so we connected and we just started talking. And I could tell, he's younger. He's 27 maybe right now, 28, somewhere in there. So he's like, 6 years younger than I am. And I could tell that he was first time founder,
Hmm.
and he was like, I started this thing. It's getting a bunch of attention on Twitter and I don't really know what to do with this.
Hmm.
And so we started talking, and I'd said, I just published this book called The Art and Business of Online Writing. I have all these frameworks. You've created this very interesting cohort model. Why don't we partner up, and I'll give all my frameworks into this. We'll treat it as a business. We'll go 50-50 and we'll build it. And at the time, I think I didn't really know what I wanted to do next after the agency. I felt really burned out and really like depressed, honestly, because I felt like my first business failed in a lot of ways. And I didn't know where it would go. And we partnered up, and then all of a sudden it just caught like wildfire. And by the end of 2021, I was completely done ghostwriting. I gave the entity to my former business partner, let
Hmm.
him continue to run it, hire another writer, do what he wanted with it. Um, and I just sort of moved on and started building Ship 30. And now we have a whole suite of products. And I've completely gone to the other side now, not services, but all digital products.
It's hard for me to believe that this Ship 30 thing is such a, like, I don't know. I feel like it's an institution and it's been around forever. I didn't realize it was so new, like
Yeah, it's
post
only,
pandemic.
yeah,
Wow.
maybe like 2.5, 3 years old. Yeah.
Wow. Cool. Is there anything else we should hear for your story from the story before I dive in? This gives some good context, I think.
I mean, I've got loads of stories, yeah, if anyone wants to hear more of, the story side or the emotional side of building and scaling a business, especially a writing business, I tell all sorts of stories in my book, The Art and Business of Ghostwriting. But no, I mean, I think that gives good context, and I'd rather spend time on what would be helpful to people.
Cool. Well, again, listeners, it's dyf.link/ghost writing book. One long word. Lots of good stuff in there. So I think for today, like I really loved your cold outreach approach, and it's really cool to know that it worked well with the agency. Before I dig into that, I guess my question is for people taking your ghostwriting course. I noticed you didn't talk about the Quora thing so much. So my guess is that in your mind, if someone's getting started, assuming that they are walking their talk, do you think that like the best get your first client or 10th client or 100th client strategy, if they're wanting to augment, would be this cold outreach stuff we're about to talk about? Or what do you think it's more nuanced than that?
Yes. The short answer is yes. I
Okay.
think one of the big mistakes that I see a lot of freelancers make, and in a lot of ways I did it too early on, is they sort of take this wait and see approach. So they're like, I'm a freelancer, and then they just sort of wait, and they wait for a friend to introduce them to a client, or they wait for someone to send them an inquiry on their website, right?
Yeah.
And waiting is not a very effective lever to grow your business. And so whether you are actively building, creating a presence for yourself on the internet or not, I think there's so much leverage in doing that you should. But whether you are or not, it's worth internalizing that the primary lever for yourself as a business, right? You are a one-person business, is you have to go out there and pound the pavement. You have to go out and contact people and find people and pitch people. And like, that is the lever.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I love, so you said you have different strategies you'd use in different contexts. For you to know, I've been doing this from scratch agency project just on the side to develop our blueprint course. And as I'm thinking of this value forward cold outreach thing, the thing in my mind is like, how can I take a value forward cold outreach approach that allows me to be present for the strategic part, but still leverage team assets for fulfillment such that it's like a scalable marketing strategy. And that the pounding of the payment is kind of like the crafting of the message, the deciding, but that the actual 6 hours it takes to make the packaged up thing doesn't necessarily have to be me. When you were running the agency and you were doing a lot of volume, what did that look like? Like, did you have team members? You said you did different cold outreach strategies there. Did you have team members doing all of the filling out of the things? Like, how involved did you have to personally be in that?
So I think it's worth, I think, using specific language and examples here. So an agency is really just a super efficient and effective one-person business scaled. So anything that we're talking about, like the difference between you doing it as an individual and an agency doing it, there really isn't a difference. It's just a matter of volume and leverage. It's the same thing. And so by the time we got to scaling an agency, a lot of the work and a lot of the thinking had already been done by me as an individual. And so I want to clarify something that's really important, which is when you're, so this idea of like a free value, free work pitch. In PGA, our Premium Ghostwriting Academy, we call it a free work pitch. So first principles. The single best way to sell someone is not to sell them. It's to educate them. So step one, whenever you explain cold outreach, you always have 50% of the room of the people who go, I hate sales. I don't want to sell people. Sales is slimy, right? And the very first thing we need to internalize is that I am not telling you to go be salesy. I am telling you that what you need to do is educate the client. All right, so what does that mean? What that means is when you talk to someone, you are not actually selling them your service. What you're doing is you're educating them on a problem within their business. They don't want to hire you for the sake of hiring you. They want to hire you to solve a specific problem. And they can't get excited about hiring you until they get excited about solving the problem, right? So step one is all cold outreach, like remove the idea of I need to go pitch my service to people. No, what you really need to do is figure out who's the type of person, the archetype of person that you want to help, and what is the specific bottleneck within their business that you want to help them solve. And this is where there's a clarity of thinking that most people do not get to. Most people just go, I'm going to target people who have newsletters, or I'm going to target people who want to write on Twitter, right? Whatever it is. No, within each one of those are a laundry list of bottlenecks that you could solve. So let's take newsletters, for example. Some people have a newsletter, but are struggling to drive traffic to it. Other people have a newsletter, drive lots of traffic, don't convert that traffic to subscribers very well. Those are two completely different problems. And what most freelancers do is they go, I can help anyone with a newsletter. No, you can't. Those are two different problems. You need to get really good at solving one of them, right? And so I have this rule of ones. I talk about it in my book constantly, which is solve one problem for one specific person in one industry in one specific way. So you're not, I'm a freelancer writer. It's, I ghostwrite, Twitter content for wellness entrepreneurs who want to convert more social readers into free newsletter subscribers. And when we do that by publishing regular Twitter content, right? The specificity of that is extremely important. And when you have that, when you go talk to them, when you go pitch them, you're not talking about yourself or your service at all. What you're talking to them about is, hey, you want to grow your newsletter? You're struggling with driving traffic. I'm going to help you drive traffic. When we drive more traffic, you're going to convert more newsletter subscribers. You have to educate them on the problem first.
Totally. And something that you said in the book that I really liked, which I want to dig into that 111 thing in a minute, but something I really liked in the book was one of your like sort of checklist KPIs was if they're failing in public. I really liked that. Brennan talks about like magnify, not create. And I liked that. Like, you don't say, hey, how about you start tweeting, person? It's more you see that they are tweeting, but you see an opportunity or way that they're not doing it very well. I thought that was quite cool.
Yes.
To contextualize for the people listening, the approach. My understanding is that this kind of value first cold outreach approach is essentially, number one, find the person. And you have this kind of layout of, are they reachable? Do they have a business? Are they failing in public? We can dig into all that in a minute. But essentially, number one, you find the person. Number two, you have this value forward email that it seems like contains a packaged up cool thing. And then the next step is that you get on like a call so you can help them more. And then from there, you pitch them on paid work. Do I understand the loose flow correctly to contextualize it?
Yeah, loose flow. So two nuances. One, you can do this over email. You can do this in DMs. However you get in contact with the person, you know. And then I would put a step between 1 and 2, what you said, which is it's actually inefficient to find a bunch of people and then put in a bunch of work and put together some sort of package or like free work something for all these people that you haven't had a dialogue with yet. So the step between 1 and 2 is I would first reach out to all these people that I think fit the target, and I would send them a very short email or DM asking them some sort of question like, hey, like they're failing in public in some way. You know, hey, I see that you have a weekly newsletter. I subscribed, and then like educate them on the problems. But I didn't see a welcome sequence, or I didn't see this, or I didn't see this. Like curious, is that on your radar? And then anyone who responds, that's when I would follow up with some sort of free work pitch, because you only want to invest that in someone where there's a dialogue.
So you wouldn't say something like, hey, saw you failing in public, blah, 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 blah. I personally have some ideas and I would love to like mock them up. Would you want that? You wouldn't go that zoomed in to tease that you were thinking of doing free work. You would only say, is that something you're thinking about?
You can. I've done both. I think the thing with cold outreach is it's one of those, there's not one specific right way to do it. You can do it in lots of different ways. The whole idea in that first 1 to 2 steps is you just want to get them to respond. Even if this is something that we educate writers on in PGA all the time, even if someone responds negatively, that's still a positive thing. So if I see that you have a newsletter and it's not that great, and I send you an email and I'm like, hey, I see you have a newsletter. I noticed a couple of things missing. I'm just curious if that's on your radar. And you email me back and go, no, I think our newsletter is perfectly fine. Thank you very much. Right? What most freelancers do, or most ghostwriters do, is they get really defensive or they get scared and they're like, oh, I got a negative response. And then they're like, I need to run away.
Shut down. Yeah.
Right? They shut down. And instead, what you need to realize is that you got a response.
Yeah.
The person is responding to you, right? And so what you need to then do is follow up. This is where the free work starts coming in as very effective. The person goes, no, we've got it all figured out. Thank you very much. What I would do is I would then use Loom, which is like a video recording software. I would use Loom, pull up their newsletter and record a 2-minute video of me opting in and going through and literally spending 2 minutes doing nothing but educating them on all the things they're doing wrong. And then I would send it back and be like, hey, totally understand. Didn't mean to waste your time or anything, but I put together this 2-minute Loom. I just thought this would be helpful for you. And when you do that, 70, 80, 90% of the time, the person comes back and goes, wow, I had no idea we were making all those mistakes. Thank you so much. Are you free later this week? I'd love to chat with you.
Yeah, I love this framework because I was laughing earlier because I remember when I was young and starting my business, as a web designer, I went to someone's site and I gave them some critical feedback, just trying to be helpful. but it was unprompted. And they got back and they were clearly very offended, and they gave me a bunch of critical feedback. And that kind of like scared me away from it. But in hindsight, that should have been a positive indicator, as you're talking about. And I'm sure I didn't deliver it very well. But the question I would ask is like, because I think in terms of imposter syndrome, if I were doing this about something that I consider myself an uber expert about, where I'm like, no, for sure, this person is just 100% objectively making mistakes with their newsletter, then fine. But what about in the ones where you're maybe giving critical feedback about something that, like, imagine I gave you critical feedback about your writing or something. Like, it would feel like, who the hell am I, this Zach guy, talking to this dude who's like a specialist in writing, and who am I to say this to them? Like, I guess, I don't know if I'm articulating the objection well,
Yeah.
but like, how do you address that imposter syndrome angle, especially if you're targeting clients who are a lot more influential and stuff like that?
So I ran into this too. I totally get this. I mean, again, I was ghostwriting for people. I've ghostwritten for billionaires. I've ghostwritten for startup founders that were 25 years old and exited their company for $200 million. Like, I've ghostwritten for some power player people. And I went through the same thing. Like, they would give me feedback and I would have these moments where I'm like, wow, like, who am I telling them what to do? And this is where, again, going back to first principles, I'm such a big proponent on this. Like, for no other reason, this is the single most valuable part of practicing on yourself. Because the more you practice on yourself and the more that you experience and learn what works because you've lived it versus in theory, oh, I heard on a podcast that this is how it works, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to experience it. Over time, I started to, that was a growth process within myself, where in the beginning, you know, some really influential person would be like, no, that's not how it should go. And I'd be like, well, I mean, they're the one worth, they're the one worth 500 million. So I guess they're right. Right. And then it took a couple years for me to realize, like, no, you know a lot, but about this one specific thing, I really know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that so much. And that's like the power of what you're talking about the 1-1-1-1-1. Like, if you try to know everything about everything and thus be more of an authority than this billionaire on any old thing, you're not going to succeed. But if you say, all right, I'm really freaking good at choosing the color of buttons. This is the thing. I know more in the world about button colors than anyone else. Like, it's a lot easier to become that master because it's so zoomed in. I love that.
This is, I mean, a great example is like headlines. Like, I know how to write headlines. I'll say it in the inverse. I think there are very few people on planet Earth that know how to write headlines the way that I do, to the degree that I do, because I've written thousands and thousands and thousands of them. And so I'm at a point now where I literally just, I've had this happen in the past 2 years. You know, if I'm talking to the CEO of a multi-$100 million company and he or she is like, hey, what should the headline be for this piece? Or what should the headline be for this sales letter? Or what should the headline be for this newsletter? And I tell them what I think, and they go, no, I don't like that idea. I now have gotten to a point where I just sit there and I go, okay, you're paying me for my opinion. And I know that this is the thing that I know way better than anyone else. So either take my opinion or just stop wasting my time, because I know what is going to work and your idea is not going to work. And like, that's something where you can't, I hate that whole like fake it till you make it. Like, you can't fake your way there to that. What you have to do is you have to put in the reps and you have to get the level of experience where you're like, it's not that you're puffing your chest out and being confident. What you're doing is you're just going into your repository in your brain going, I have done 5,000 repetitions of this thing.
Yeah.
I know I'm right.
Yeah. So that raises a question for me that I always find, like, in my role running this freelance community and stuff, and I'm sure you see it in the Ghostwriting Academy, that I find sometimes challenging, because I've met a lot of people who are very confident about their shitty work. And I've met a lot of people who are very unconfident about their excellent work. And it's this balance, like, how do you actually know, you know, how do you know that you are this expert of headlines? How do you audit this and ensure that you're not BSing yourself and that indeed this is pulling from enough context? How do you decide it's time for you to be confident? Is it like a certain amount of times that you've done a similar thing, what would you, I know there's a very loaded question for a first principles guy, but if you were to throw out like a rule of thumb for how you would fact check overconfidence while also ensuring you're not being imposter syndrome when you shouldn't be, when you should be confident, how would you make that decision?
That's a great question. And you're right. There is a lot of confident people who produce shitty work, and, people with who struggle to be confident but produce great work. My rule of thumb is you shouldn't. The rule of thumb is you have to make sure that you're able to deliver on the promise based on the fact that you've done it yourself. So for example, like day one, I wasn't promising clients, hey, I'm going to get you 100 million views, because I hadn't done that for myself yet. But when I did get myself 100 million views, I would go to clients and go, I don't know if I can get you 100 million views, but I'm telling you that I've done it for myself and I know the path to get there.
Yeah.
So I think whatever it is that you're promising to a client, you have to have that moment of, honesty with yourself and go, have I done that for myself? Like what drives me crazy is you have all these freelance writers that are like, I'm going to help you position and sell your digital product. You've never sold a digital product. So you should go do that for yourself. And then you can go to a client very confidently and go, I know how to help you sell a digital product that's going to do 5 figures because I have an ebook right now that's making me 5 figures. Like, I think that is one of the best ways to power level yourself as your own case study, but also power level yourself emotionally to go, oh, I'll stand by my work because I've proven it to myself.
So I want to latch on to that one if I can. So let's say somebody primarily wants to help with the positioning and selling. The argument someone could make is that if they, so let's say this person is a copywriter. If they want to grow as a copywriter and the prerequisite is that they have to launch their own product first, it seems like you could argue that a more efficient way to build those same chops, the copy chops, would be through, say, pro bono work for a client who's maybe a little bit smaller and who has like the uber low hanging fruit opportunities, like they don't have a fucking headline on their page or like whatever the things are that even a noob could definitely improve. What are your thoughts on that whole get the reps in by doing it yourself versus get the reps in through pro bono work kind of approach?
I think both are extremely effective. Again, it's worth keeping in mind. Even with something like free work, you still need someone else to say yes.
Yeah.
Whereas practicing on yourself, you literally just need yourself to say yes. So the single easiest way to start is do it for yourself. But I totally agree. You can acquire and refine those skills by doing it for free for other people. I've done that for years. I did it all throughout my career. In some ways, I still do it today if the opportunity is right, if I want to learn something. The thing that you have to be really honest about, and you see this plague in huge companies, you have to be honest about whether you're the one who drives the result or if you were just sitting in the room. There's a lot of, remember, the bottleneck you're trying to solve for is your own skill. The bottleneck you're not trying to solve for is, I need some point of credibility. Credibility without the skill is worthless, right? So if you're going to go work within a company or you're going to do some work for free for someone, you need to be very honest with yourself about what you're doing and how you're able to use that as a vehicle to acquire and refine the skill and drive a result. But if you go work with someone and other people are the one who drive the result, they're like, hey, we figured out how to help this person sell $500,000 worth of ebooks. And you just sat in the room, or you came up with a bunch of headlines that they didn't use. And then you try and take that and go leverage that point of credibility to get other clients. It seems like a great idea. And then the first client who says yes, within a week, they're going to be like, you have no idea what you're doing.
Yeah. It's like short-term games at the cost of an actual long-term business and strategy and credibility.
Yes.
But something that comes to mind as you talk about this, I think is so great, is like looking for miniature ways to practice. Like Delia Monk came onto the podcast, who's a copywriter that does cold outreach. And she talked about how she likes to make cold outreach fun. Like that's for her biggest win is finding a way to like have fun with it. And what I love about what you're talking about, that the bottleneck is your skill. You could test this, you could build these chops in other ways. Like, for example, if you get clients through Upwork, you could test different first lines, or you could have headlines, like subject lines in your cold outreach emails that you're sending to people. And you could use data from these things to test your skills. And it doesn't have to be everything with some gigantic project. You can build skills in like these micro zoomed in test ways that are tangential. One thing I'm curious about with your take with cold outreach, let's say there's somebody who they have an idea of generally who they want to help. So like the 111 thing, or 1111, 4 ones. I guess it's a 2-part question. So number one is, how do you get such zoomed in knowledge? In your opinion, what's the best way to get zoomed in, validated knowledge that you're not over specializing in an area that doesn't even exist? Like if you say I'm helping, I think you said like health people with what was the example one you gave earlier of your zoomed in 11111?
Yeah, I mean, there's tons. It's like, Twitter threads for wellness influencers who want to drive traffic to their newsletter. You can get really specific with it.
So how do you arrive at that? Because presumably you have a kind of data-driven approach to it versus just deciding on such a zoomed-in specific thing.
So, yeah, I mean, I experienced this in my journey. It's also the overarching POV that we share with writers in Ship 30, which is you're not going to come up with it sitting at your desk. Like, that's not one of those things where you just stare out the window and you're like, what's the perfect answer and archetype of who I should target, right? Mm-hmm. What always happens is you start working with people, and then over time you start to notice patterns, or you start to notice things that work well. In a very visceral way, I experienced it right after I quit my job. My first client was ghostwriting, but then I got another client where I put together a social media strategy for them. And I got another client where I was writing their newsletter. And then I got another client. Like, I was doing stuff all over the board. And it took me some time to realize, when I build social media strategies for companies, I hate it. It's also not as profitable. But when I ghostwrite 800-word articles for entrepreneurs and I get to ask them questions, I love that. Right. So over time, really the whole goal is just start and then notice the patterns, ask yourself what you enjoy, ask yourself what's profitable, what's most profitable for you, and then just keep doubling down on, this is the person I want to help.
So let's say you start with like a pretty zoomed out thing. You're like, I want to help some type of person with some type of thing. And let's say that you have solid skills. Like, so let's say you're a developer with solid dev skills, or you're a writer with solid writing skills. And you have this idea of how you want to help them. Like, let's say you want to help them with Twitter threads. And while you're a good writer, you haven't done Twitter threads before. So you're like kind of testing a potential service offering with some outreach or whatever. When you do I guess before I get too ahead of myself, do you think cold outreach is a viable way to build experience testing a service offering that you have the core skills for? Because you're a good writer, you could write, you've done some research on Twitter stuff, and this is a good way to like practice and test for them. Or do you think you should not do cold outreach with this thing you have not yet successfully implemented?
I feel more of the latter.
Okay.
I think it is very short-term thinking. You see it in cold outreach and services. You also see it in products all the time too, where people are like, I'm going to create 5 different landing pages for 5 different products, and I'm going to see which one my Facebook ads get the most click on, and I'm going to go build that product. And it's like, that's a great idea in theory, but you haven't built any of those types of products before. So you're sort of like, I'm going to wait to see if the opportunity presents itself, and then I'm going to go acquire the skills. And almost always that it seems like the shortcut, and then that's the longer road in disguise. Really, it's like, I guess a way of saying this in the inverse is people are always trying to find like, what's the hot, easy opportunity where people will just magically say yes. And it's actually a lot harder to do that than it is to just get good at something and then explain to other people, I'm really good at this and here's how it can help you. So I would always start with the skill and do it for yourself first.
So then maybe I'm guessing that of that previous route, which sounds like you don't think is a good idea, compared to the following, you'd think the following is better. So let's say I look at my past stack of tasks that I've done for clients or at a day job or whatever. So let's say I built a website for somebody with like a membership backend. I might delineate every single thing that I did for this client and everything I've done for other clients. And I kind of pick out ideas. What could I do in isolation as my specialty rather than doing it as part of a gigantic project, and then experiment with plucking this thing out and testing that as my value forward.
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
I really feel like one of the biggest mental scaffolding mistakes that solopreneurs of any kind, solopreneur, freelancer, is they jump to this conclusion of, I need to do everything. I need to do everything for every type of person. Otherwise, I'm never going to get any clients.
Yep.
And in reality, the much faster and much more profitable path is plucking out one specific thing and going, I just do that, and I'm really good at that. And not only that, I'm really good at doing that for a specific type of person, or a specific type of person in a specific industry. And my agency was a great example. We had clients constantly ask us, can you help us with website copy? Can you help us launch our newsletter? Can you help us do this? We said, no, we do one thing. We write 800-word thought leadership articles. And in a given month, we were a factory. We were producing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thought leadership articles every single month. One very specific thing that I plucked out, and I said, that's the only thing that we do. And the second thing, this is a big point in my book, is you have to realize that when someone's hiring you, in a lot of ways, the value of hiring you is not really the fact that you're performing this labor task. The reason why someone gets excited to hire you is because what they're buying is pattern recognition. So, for example, we have a paid newsletter called Write with AI. It's all about how to take digital writing frameworks and then leverage ChatGPT or other AI platforms and automate yourself. Very specific. If I was to hire a ghostwriter tomorrow to help us with this newsletter, to help us write issues or to help us with social content or whatever it was, if I was to hire a ghostwriter tomorrow, I am not really looking for just someone to write. What I'm looking for is someone who is obsessed with AI. I'm looking for someone who has pattern recognition in the industry of AI so that I don't have to sit there for hundreds of hours and explain to you, well, here's how to think about AI, and here's all the tools that are coming out, and here's all. I need you to be up to speed on that, right? Just like if you're a freelance writer and you want to write YouTube scripts for YouTube creators, what the creator's buying is your pattern recognition in the world of YouTube, right? A YouTube creator is not excited to hire a freelance writer who goes, I have no idea what an effective hook is on YouTube. Well, now I'm missing half the value of hiring you, right? And that's why this rule of ones is so important, is because it's not just when you get more specific, it's, you're niching down, it's easier to get the right types of clients. All those things are true. But the reason that clients say yes faster, why it's easier to get those clients, is because you're not being hired just as a writer. You're being hired because of your pattern recognition in a niche. Now I don't have to spend all that time training you.
Yeah, you can be the advisor versus the cog, commoditized kind of worker. On this kind of thread, something I was interested to get your take on is like, so I've had some people do cold outreach to me that was very generous, very value forward. But what sometimes happens is if it's up to me to decide what I want this person's help with,
100%.
or their help requires, it requires my time, it's kind of challenging. And so what strikes me is with certain things, like I've been, based on who attended live today and stuff, I've been thinking about your approach in the context of different industries. For something like, let's say you are a designer, I think it's like really easy because you just design the thing, you give it to them. But for certain things like, let's say CRO or development, things where you need logins, you need buy-in, you need to hook things up. I guess the first question was, do you agree that when you're doing some sort of value forward cold outreach, it's best to do it in a way where you can just package everything up and give it to them without them having to direct you, without you having to get anything from them? What's your take on this kind of broad thing?
Yeah, so two things. So one, the single worst thing you could do with a free work pitch or a value forward cold outreach, the worst thing you could do is go, I'd like to provide you some value. Let me know what I can help you with.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's crazy because people do this all the time, and you don't realize that when you say that, you're putting the burden on the person you're pitching.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right?
totally.
So mistake numero uno. Second, though, is I really feel like it's worth, you know, clarity of thought and key distinction between packaging something up and giving it to someone versus educating them on the problem.
Okay.
From my experience, I have always found that educating on the problem is way more effective than just creating something for the sake of creating something.
Hmm.
So I'll give you a great example. With Ship 30, I've had tons of people, because I talk about this all the time. And so whenever I talk about this on a podcast or something, there's always 10 people who hear it and are like, I'm going to go pitch Cole after this. Right. And so they put together, you know, a mini ebook from one of our podcast episodes, or they take a bunch of my Twitter threads and they put them into a Notion dashboard or something, and they make me something. And then they pitch it to me and they go, I made you something. Also, I'd like you to hire me. And a lot of times the thing that you make, or the thing that this person makes me, is like, cool, thanks for doing that. I didn't really need that asset, but I appreciate it. But even still, it's like, what are you doing? You're saying I made you something now, and then they put the burden back on me. Now, what else can I help you with? Right? And so that's why I don't find that to be that effective, because either way, you still end up in a place where now it's my responsibility to figure out what to do with you. Right?
But a question I have is, yeah, go ahead. Let's hear it.
Versus when you educate on the problem, the free work is actually the fact that you're doing free consulting. That's really the mental shift. Is instead of me making you something, instead of me making you a CRO dashboard or whatever it is, if I just pull up your site, or I pull up an example and I do a 2 or 3 minute loom and I explain to you, hey, I don't have full access to what you're doing, but based on what I can tell, like this, I bet could be improved. This could be, I'm educating you on all of the problems. Now I've removed all burden of you figuring out what to do with me. I've basically just identified, this would be my to-do list. Would you like me to go solve these problems for you?
Hmm. So yeah, that was going to be my question, is that if what you do is the education, like I can think CRO is a good semi-challenging one. And then if something like YouTube thumbnails, I think is a good example of an easy one to package the thing. Like to me, if somebody sent me a video that was like, Zach, here are some CRO ideas. I think I actually kind of had this recently because a site security, like white hat hacker type of person is like, I found some vulnerabilities, and he shared the vulnerabilities. But now it's like, okay, so now this is just like a big homework assignment. Now I have all these other things I got to sort. Or if someone gives me CRO ideas, it's like, okay, well now, like I either got to hire this person to do it, or I just have like more, like it feels like a task, versus if someone was like, hey, Zach, here's some specific things. Here's a mock-up of what I think a good lead magnet would be. Like, here, I would put this headline here. I wrote the headline. It's like visually here. I don't know. It seems to me like an actual packaged up asset. Or like if your YouTube thumbnails suck and someone literally sends you an example, like an actual redesigned thumbnail, versus saying, I would change this. They actually change it and send it. I would have thought that would be the more compelling hook. So I'm curious about that.
So,
that homework.
Yeah, so both definitely work. I think the thing I'm advocating for is if you start with the education on the problem. So YouTube example, someone pulls up our podcast, they loom up like 5 of our videos, and they're like, hey, these thumbnails are cool, but I would change this. Here's why. And they share some of the thinking. A, it's educating me on the problem, which I find helpful. And B, they're proving to me that they know how to think about this stuff. So I'm like, cool. The reason I advocate for that first, because I agree, now it feels like you have a to-do list. And actually, that's how you kind of want the client to feel. You want them to feel like you've made me aware of a problem that I now have to figure out how to solve.
And then hiring you is the solution to not have to sort it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's cool.
And if you start there, then before you spend the time creating the thumbnails, right? So what do? You respond to them and you're like, wow, that's really great feedback. What do I do with this, right? And that's where then the follow-up is, hey, no, I'm happy to help. I put together 5 thumbnails for you. Check these out. This is based on all the stuff that I pointed out to you. And by the way, if you want me to do all this for you, I charge $2,000 a month. I'd give you 10 thumbnails a month, right? So I advocate with start with low effort, high impact, 2 to 3 minute loom, educate on the problem, make the founder aware of the to-do list item that they now have to go solve in their business. And then go, and I put together some examples. Here's a couple packaged assets. By the way, if you want me to do this, here's my productized service.
And those examples, they would be past work, or that you would have custom made those with part of the pitch?
You can do either, but if you can make it custom, like what we teach in PGA is educate people on their opt-ins and then put together a outline of educational email course. So be like, I've identified the problem for you. Here's what I would do instead. Here's high level what it would look like. If you want to hire me to do this, it's $5,000, let's go. So I think that's the pairing. Educate on the problem, follow up with like some sort of packaged asset.
Okay. So let's break this into steps. Let's say you pull somebody's site up, and I hope you're fine with me getting all nitty gritty like this.
I love it.
Cool. So let's say you pull somebody's site up and you're like, they're trying to think of something a little harder, because headline's kind of easy because you can work a headline. Let's say that like you sign up for their e-course, you get all their emails, and you spot like 6 problems. So step 1, you find the person. Step 2, you identify the problem. Step 3, this is where I want to clarify. So step 3, you'd send them a message being like, hey, I took your thing. I love you. I'll ask you for a template kind of thing there. But like, you say all the right things. But the CTA there is like, do you want me to send you some ideas? Or is the CTA, I sent you some ideas, here's the Loom video, and then what's the actual ask?
So you can do either in there, but what I would personally do is I'd identify the person, go to their website, type in my email, go through their funnel, and then I'd send them an email and go, hey, I love your product or service, but I typed in my email and I identified a bunch of missing opportunities. Don't know if that's on your radar. I'm happy to share. I really love what you're doing. I'm happy to share. Do you mind if I send you a 3-minute Loom? I can walk you through it. Super short. They respond back 3 days later and they're like, sure, I guess. Right? Like, fine, I got an answer. Then I would go create a 3-minute Loom. I'd have all their, emails or the whole funnel pulled up, and I'd go, hey, I love what you're doing. I love your product. This works even better when you're pitching people where you actually do love their product. And you're like, but this headline probably isn't doing what you think it's doing. I would reformat this, right? 3 minutes of just problem. And then at the very end of the Loom, you're like, I just wanted to share this with you. I hope it's helpful. And by the way, for context, if you're looking for someone to help solve it, like this is what I do all day, every day. Super short, right? Send them the Loom. And then my rule of thumb, because again, this is a big mistake freelancers make, is they go, well, I sent it and I never heard back. Yeah, you should follow up with them every 3 days for the rest of your life. Like literally until they tell you, please stop emailing me or I will call the authorities. You have every right to keep bumping it up in their inbox, right? So 3 days, they don't respond. You email back, hey, I'm sure you've been swamped. I just want to make sure you saw this. 3 days later, hey, I'm sure you've been swamped. I just saw your company in the news. Congrats on the product launch. Just wanted to bump this up on your inbox. 3 days later, 3 days later, 3 days later. 3 weeks later, they finally respond. They go, hey, sorry, I've been swamped. I finally got to look at this. This is so helpful. What are next steps? And then everyone freezes up again. They're like, what do I do, right? You can either push straight for a call. So this is when we started getting in my agency. We just skipped and went straight to the call, right? Or you can follow up with a packaged asset if you want. And you're like, hey, yeah, I built it out for you already. Here you go. Wanted you to have this for free. And by the way, I do this, here's what my package looks like. I do this for you every month. Give them the little pitch. And you just do that over and over and over again.
So you don't think in those follow-ups, like I'm thinking about, like I still haven't addressed these security vulnerabilities. They're in my inbox, maybe one day. So you don't think in any of these follow-ups, you'd try to lower friction, like supposing that they have kind of watched your video or they've got on the radar, but they don't have the mental energy to deal with it. You wouldn't in one of the follow-ups say like, hey, by the way, I'm happy to just like do some of these things if blah, 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 blah. You would just kind of keep surfacing.
Well, you can. It just depends on, if you never got a response on that first loom, for example, you want to make sure that they see it. So the first thing is just, did you see it? I'm just bumping this up. But if they see it and they're like, hey, thanks, I'm just busy right now. Like, yeah, then move on to the next phase, right? Remove more friction. Sure, no problem. I put this together for you. Let me know if you want me to put this on autopilot. Let me know if you want me to take this off your plate. I think it's a careful balance of you're educating them on the problem and you're showing them that you can deliver some free value or you can help them in some way, but you also have to not be afraid to ask. Like at some point you have to be like, this is what I do.
Yeah.
I would love to help you. And I think that's where I notice people struggle is if they don't immediately get their, I think what most freelancers think is that they're going to do step one and then the client's going to email back and go, thank you so much for this. I've made the official decision to hire you. Please send over the like, that's not what happens, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be the one at some point to be like, this is the problem. This is what I would do. Here's a solution. And I want to let you know that this is my jam. This is what I do all day, every day. And I talk about this a bit in my book. It's a huge focus in PGA. You have to, this would be a good thing to dig into. You have to package your service. You have to productize yourself. You can't just say, hire me.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just say, hire me as a freelance writer. You have to say very explicitly, this is the goal. This is what you want. These are the problems. I specialize in solving the problems. I do it in this way. And my package is I give you X for Y per month, or I give you X per Y flat fee.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And something as an aside that I loved when you were talking about how you convey your pricing in the book. I liked that you position as, even when you do something for this first time, you say, I normally charge blah, blah, blah per month. I liked that one. And that was in the story that Cole was sharing where he very nervously pitched something at 10K that somebody was expecting to pay 30K for.
That was a hard lesson. Yeah.
Yeah. So suppose you do this value forward email and let's say that they respond. They're like, yeah, I saw it. It was pretty cool. And you're like, awesome, dope. Here, I just did it for you. And they respond to that and they're like, OMG, thank you so much. Do you segue from there into something like, you're welcome. I would love to do this for other aspects of your business. I have this thing, it costs this, and I think it would have this impact for you. Is 100%. That how you'd segue it?
Yep. You would go straight there. Like cool. Just accelerate to that end. That's the goal.
Do you think that, gosh, I'm looking at the time. I'm like, all right, Zach, you got 20 minutes left. You got to make it count. I could chew your ear off about this all day. One question I do have is, in your opinion, if someone's new, so let's say I built a bunch of sites, and a couple times, or maybe even one time, I did a certain thing. Like, let's say I built one membership site for a client. And I was like, that's pretty cool. I'd like to do that more. Membership's big scope. So let's say I built one opt-in page for one client. And I'm like, okay, I want that to be my slice. So I'm going to do this cold outreach thing. Do you think someone should reach out to like the big fish straight away? Should they go for the small fish first? Do you have any opinions on like that?
So it's funny. We were literally someone asked this exact same question in PGA last week. My dad has a saying. He says, you should always drink the best bottle of wine in the house, because if you do that, you're always drinking the best bottle of wine that you have. Right? Because you drink the best one and then it's gone. And then the next week, you're like, well, now I'm drinking the next best one that I have, right? You're always drinking the best bottle of wine that you have. Mm-hmm. And I think that rule holds true for a lot of things in life, but cold outreach is, funny enough, like a great example. People think, oh, should I wait? Okay. If you wait, right, that's kind of assuming that the world is constant. Like nothing's going to change. Like the big fish today will be the big fish forever. Right. That's not true, right? Every day a new billion-dollar company is born. So I think it's worth keeping in mind that like it really doesn't matter. A lot of these questions that people have are self-imposed bottlenecks. Should I do this or this? And then because they don't have the answer, they decide to do nothing.
Right.
Right. And instead it's like, no, do both. See what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. Scrolling through my little notes here. So on this 1-1-1-1-1 many ones approach, So your mind about, quote, how to choose a good niche, it seems like it's about pulling from like trying things, zooming in, and just gradually honing versus sitting back, thinking about it, deciding. That's the vibe I'm getting.
That's the strategy. More actionably, your niche, wherever you are today, is almost always related to some sort of interest that you have or had, or some sort of industry that you've worked in. It's like, why did I build a ghostwriting agency? Well, because the only business I knew how to build was an agency, because I worked at an agency. So oftentimes your niche, like, this is what's so interesting. When people think about what's my niche, they start from a place of, my niche could be anything. No, your niche could not be anything, right? Your niche couldn't be biotech.
Yeah.
Unless you came from that world, right? Your niche couldn't be knitting unless you've been knitting for 20 years, right? So your niche isn't, it could be anything. Your niche usually is like 3 or 4 or 5 different things based on jobs you've had, experiences that you've had, obsessions or hobbies that you've had, right? So you start with that. Start experimenting there. And then, if you're really asking the question, well, what's the fastest path to making the most amount of money? Of that little list of things that the question to ask is just, which one of those niches, which one of those categories is actively growing and constantly being innovated on, and which one is most related to some sort of financial outcome?
Yeah. Yeah, I think at least where I have struggled in the past, I think it was like when I was first going through the 30 by 500 course or something. What can be challenging is if you're used to being a freelancer, or even worse, used to being an employee, it can feel like your only real business to business niche would be, I guess, whoever you are right now. Like if you haven't had this big breadth of business to business experience, you might not belong into a lot of B2B niches. And it would basically just be whatever your past job was or whatever your current job is. I don't know what your thoughts are on that about how to branch that and grow it. If it's about getting niche experience by helping clients, it's a big question.
So I think human beings have a very hard time conceptualizing the size of things. And like, it's funny to me whenever someone's like, I've only worked in B2B software. Like, that's my only niche. It's like, do you know how big B2B software is? It's like hundreds of billions of dollars, right? So I often find that the same people who go, I'm in this position and it's too small and I need to figure something else out. No, it's not. It's way bigger than you can even wrap your head around. And then second, what's going to happen is, yeah, you might start there, but extend the time horizon. If you worked with a bunch of clients in B2B tech, for example, chances are somewhere along that path, you're going to have an opportunity to acquire some sort of nuanced skill that's going to allow you to shift and pivot elsewhere if you want to.
Yeah.
And
especially
a lot of
if you're
times,
trying to own the slice.
Yeah, a lot of times it presents itself, it falls in your lap, and it's just your choice. Like, do you want to take that and double down on it? Do you want to keep doing what you're doing? But the bottleneck, it all goes back, it's first principles thinking. It's like, the bottleneck is not making any one of these decisions. The bottleneck is you need to start. You need volume. You need to go.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really great. And something I want to chat about like packaging and pricing and being like this consultant versus commodity kind of thing that ties in with this. So something I was going to ask that I kind of feel like doesn't need to be asked, but I'm still going to ask it to make it explicit. When I was going through the book, I was kind of thinking about how the stuff you teach is very much like what we teach in Double Your Freelancing Rate around not being like a keyboard for hire. And a question that I had down was what your thoughts are on, like, if someone's getting all their work from, say, Upwork right now, if there's any way at all, because you talk about reactivity and how whenever somebody is reactive, they kind of don't get to control the price or the negotiations. I was going to ask if you think there's any way to alchemize that on platforms like Upwork, but maybe after all this chatting we've been doing, like maybe the way is that you split your attention between Upwork to get the bills paid, but doing this kind of value forward cold outreach that is more supportive of you being this strategist. But yeah, I guess tie it all into a question. If someone gets all their work from Upwork right now, and they don't want that. They want to be in a more consultancy role. What do you think their best path forward is?
So yeah, there's like 2 or 3 different things I want to double click on here. So one is, one of the principles I talk about in the art and business of ghostwriting is it's like the 80-20 time law. So I am a very big believer in that you should not, you have to treat yourself as a business. You're a one-person business. And this is true even if you scale yourself into an agency, but you're a one-person business. You should not be at 100% capacity. You should be at max 80% capacity. And the remaining 20%, so let's say that right now you're getting all your clients through Upwork. And Upwork inherently is a race to the bottom. I'm not a big fan of Upwork. I think you're only going to get premium pricing if you start going outside of Upwork. You go directly to people. But let's say you are. You should operate with this 80-20 time law where you only take on as many clients as you have the bandwidth. That's about, 80% of what you can handle. And then the remaining 20%, you should always be pitching premium pricing. You should always be trying to swing to the next tier, because the upside is you could double or triple the revenue per unit, the revenue per client, for example, if one person says yes. And the downside is there is no downside. They say no, and you still have 80% of your clients, you're still paying your bills, you're still living your life, right? So I think if you want to notch up your pricing over time, you have to live by this 80-20 time law where 20% of the time you should be swinging outside of your league so that you can start to notch up. That's going to give you the confidence to start increasing your rates over time. More generally, like I said, I'm not a big fan of Upwork. I think what's hard, if you were to finesse it, the way to do it would be, someone might contact you on Upwork for something very tactical. I need a newsletter writer, or I need a, landing page copywriter. And then when you get on the phone with them, your whole goal would be, I need to educate them on a different problem. I need to educate them on a problem they don't know that they have. So they contacted me thinking they need their landing page rewritten. And I need to educate them on that's actually not what they need help with. They need help with something different. And you're only able to change your value when you change the frame of the conversation.
Right.
So that's the only way that you can leverage Upwork in, moving it in a different direction. But the problem still a little bit is then you run into them being like, well, you price anchored yourself to $50 an hour on an Upwork. Like now you want me to pay you super premium for this different thing? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I loved that story, by the way. Was it the agency that you worked at before you quit from your ink revenue, where you were talking about how your boss called up the people with the RFAP? Yeah, that was cool. I don't know if that's worth using our limited time. So maybe we have that as a reason that someone should go check out the book to read more. I loved that story because basically RFPs, I look at them as this like very fixed, immutable thing. And Cole's old boss at the marketing agency basically did what Cole just described with an RFP to get the scope like rebuilt. And then of course they were the obvious choice for that. Okay, so it sounds like in this case, if someone's totally dependent on Upwork now, you'd, instead of saying, let's try to get premium rates on Upwork, you'd probably say the better play would be to deallocate some Upwork time, spend that time on like some value forward cold outreach. That's
totally cool. The problem with Upwork, right, is like, even if you put a premium price on Upwork, like you're a freelancer on Upwork. So like you're sort of raising a neon sign being like, I am in the game that's called race to the bottom.
Yeah.
And so even if you try and charge more, you're sitting in a context where everyone else is charging less. And so I would really encourage, like, I understand that people get their start there and it's fine, but I would really encourage building yourself off of that platform, using yourself as the case study, doing cold outreach yourself separately, and 20% of the time pitching premium pricing, trying to swing outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah, that's very smart. I love it. So for everyone who's here live, if you have any questions, especially like about packaging for cold outreach, feel free to type them in. So guys, people here live, if you like, I had some down that I thought would be cool to get Cole's take on, of like how we might take what are typically really large projects and distill them into services. Like Cole, for your background, where I think I struggle the most in the community is like, we've got some developers in here whose typical projects are, say, a 6 to 12 month or just indefinite app build, where it's almost like kind of a glorified employee or long-term contractor thing. And the hardest part there is getting away from this like gigantic varying scope into something packaged up, especially for those early stages. So it could be fun for us to workshop some stuff there, like what a developer might do to create, like, especially if they're like an app developer or something like very technical, very back end. And no one's typing in questions, so we have time for that. But before we dig into that, to make the most of your time here, like, are there any things that you wish I'd asked that I haven't, like anything you think would be really good to dig into on this whole theme?
So, the only thing that I really want to make sure that we say explicitly is to, again, remind everyone that you are not selling a service. I think that's a really hard thing to wrap your head around. You're not selling a service. What a service is just a vehicle to solve a problem that unlocks some sort of positive outcome. So the client actually does not care about your service. The client only cares about solving a specific problem that unlocks some sort of positive outcome. And that positive outcome almost always is rooted in or price anchored to, I want to stop losing money. I want to stop losing time. I want to make more money. I want to preserve and have an abundance of time. It's almost always one of those four. And so when you're thinking about what you're selling, I talk about it in my book. The whole idea is to create some sort of irresistible offer. And what an irresistible offer really is it's not just, here's all the things that I'm going to do for you. That is important. It's worth listing out. I want to make you client aware. These are all the things that are going to go into solving this problem and making you successful. But really, it's this equation that you need to ground the client in, which is, what's the problem? What's the reason that problem is occurring? What is the ultimate negative consequence of not solving that problem? What is the solution? What are the benefits of this solution? And what is the ultimate dream outcome that we're going to help you accomplish? And so, for example, let's just walk through an example. Let's say I'm a newsletter ghostwriter. Okay, so very specific problem. You don't know how to convert more Twitter followers into newsletter subscribers. The reason that problem is happening is because you're sending Twitter readers, Twitter followers, to a landing page that just says, opt in for my newsletter. That's the problem. We need to fix that landing page. The ultimate consequence of not solving that problem means you could be the most prolific writer on Twitter, generate all this organic content, and your opt-in rate is still going to be sub 5%. That's a lot of wasted effort. The solution is we need to change that opt-in. So what I specialize in, service, is I specialize in creating 5-day educational email courses. The benefit of that educational email course is it's going to increase the opt-in rate from like sub 5%, which is what I bet it is right now, to north of 50, 60, 70%, because we're going to have such a value forward approach. And the ultimate positive outcome of that is when we solve that problem, every person who opts in is going to have this really warm onboarding into your newsletter, and they are going to be primed then to join your newsletter, understand what you do, understand the value of what you're providing, and are way more likely to then buy your $150 digital product on the back end.
Yeah.
That is an irresistible offer frame.
Yeah.
And when you do that, which most people don't, when you do that, then when you drop and it costs $5,000, or and it costs $10,000, the client goes, I totally understand why.
Yeah.
Because you've set the frame. Versus you walking in the door going, I'm a newsletter ghostwriter. You should hire me.
Yeah. I charge $30 an hour to write, or $150 an hour to write, and I will write for you for your newsletter.
Right.
Would you like to hire me?
Yeah. that is literally you raising your hand being like, I am a commodity. You can take advantage of me.
This is a good question from Sam. So Sam, you're asking about crafting these call to actions. This is for the cold outreach of like, hey, I'm going to give you some ideas. That's my question for you, Sam, to clarify. But Sam asks, and I hope he clarifies by the time I finish restating the question, how important is social proof for example, this benefited these exact people, like past clients or whatever, in a certain way. How important is that social proof when crafting these call to actions, like the if you reached out to somebody and gave them ideas for raising their opt-in rates?
It's not. You know, everyone puts way more emphasis on social proof, credibility, testimonials than it deserves. Here's the thing. First of all, again, you should be your own best case study. If you're not your own social proof to start, that's the first problem to solve. Second of all, if you properly, so take the little monologue that I just listed out. If you properly educate someone on that frame, problem, reason of problem, negative outcome of not solving problem, solution, benefit of solution, ultimate dream outcome. If you do that effectively, the client isn't even going to bother asking you, well, who else have you worked with? Can you send me your portfolio?
Because you obviously know your shit. Yeah.
Right. You've just established, I run this.
Yeah.
I run this. Yeah. Right. And so anyone who's like, what's my social proof? You're trying to solve the wrong problem. The problem is you need to figure out what's the irresistible offer.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I think, and that's the core. I think the core thing that ties into the, like, you can't fake it till you make it thing is, like, if you were to try to bullshit your way into that, you could throw out some numbers. You'd say, oh, 60%. I bet that sounds like a fine number to get the opt-in rates to and stuff, but you wouldn't have any of that context to say why. And even best case scenario, someone believes you, probably you're not going to hit those numbers. But when supposing you go forward and you have the context and you are the expert in this thing, they're just going to know. So I think that's cool. It's great to hear. That's a great question, Sam. Thanks. And it's great to hear that you don't think it's so important. Cool.
Yeah, it's not.
So guys, I got through about 20%. So this is on track for the 6 hours that I needed. Is there anything, before we go, is there anything else coming up to, like, add some context or clarify or anything like that sticks out?
Not really. You know, I mean, obviously, if this is something you really want to dig into, we have tons of resources. Happy to be helpful, but we've covered a ton here. Anyone could take the things that we talked about and go execute on them. You know, I think a lot of the value of being in a program like W Freelancing or joining PGA or whatever it is, a lot of times it's the community, it's the mentorship, it's the accountability, it's the ongoing, you know, I have questions I want to be able to ask. That's a lot of the value. Yeah. But the information is out there.
And if someone wants to join PGA, where would they go to do that?
Head over to premiumghostwritingacademy.com, fill out our application survey, and we'll go from there.
Nice. So before we go, I want to ask, what is your number one piece of advice to your younger self? And you can choose any version of your younger self because you've had these big milestones.
Number one, this was a mistake that I made as an individual, and then it was a mistake that compounded when we scaled into our agency, is you have no idea where your pricing ceiling is. You have no idea. When I was charging $100 an article, I couldn't believe it. When I was charging $200 an article, I couldn't believe it. I got all the way up to charging $3,000 an article. And something that we did with when we started scaling the agency, at the time I was probably charging like $500 an article, is when we started our agency. And because that was as high as I had gotten at that point, we just assumed that was the ceiling. So we built an agency for a year and a half before even asking the question, should we charge more? And I feel like that, I experienced it really viscerally, but I feel like it's so true for so many freelancers and solopreneurs, is like, you get a couple people to say yes at the price point that you started at, and then you think you can never change it.
Yeah.
And you have no idea where your ceiling is, which is why I advocate so much for the 80-20 time law. Like,
yeah, I love that.
Cover your bills, right? But keep notching up over and over and over again.
Yeah, I think when I did this service offering right after I quit my job called Online in a Day. And when I launched it, I charged like $1,000. And I basically built a website for somebody in a day. It took like 16 hours, very intense. And I was like, there's no way I could ever charge more than this. And I would never do that now. And I think when I ended, it was like $5K. And there was still more ceiling to go. Yeah. And I think that's what's so great about your 80-20 approach, is that you don't assume that you just find the ceiling and stop. it's like the process, it's built in that you're always kind of probing for the next level.
Yep.
Do you think that the best way to get the security there is to, like, I feel like there's a lot of, and this is obviously adding a new question, but I feel like there's a lot of power in owning the lead flow and constantly be pipelining new leads. I see a lot of people get desperate when it's like they don't know when the next project's going to come. I think that's the biggest rate sabotager. So would you
Totally.
say that if someone's doing cold outreach, they should always do it for a certain amount of hours every week, regardless of what their pipeline looks like?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there will be periods where like all of a sudden 5 clients say yes. And you're like, okay, whoa, I don't have the time to do cold outreach for the next 2 or 3 weeks because I'm swamped. But very quickly thereafter, you should get back in the habit. It's the old adage, ABC, always be closing.
Yeah.
Right? It's like there was never a time, myself as a ghostwriter or building our agency, where I wasn't actively writing on the internet. I wasn't going to events. I wasn't, we weren't cold emailing and cold pitching people. We were always drumming up new business. And that's what allowed us to grow so quickly. You have to be in that state all the time.
So that's, I guess, the closing question there is like, would you say, like, how far out should someone always be booked? If they're doing this 80-20 thing, they're trying to modulate their cold outreach strategy, like what should they aim as their booked out pipeline?
I think that is largely a reflection of your churn. So for example, like with my agency, we were selling 6-month contracts, and we learned that on average, people who stayed all 6 months versus people who churned out after like 2 months for whatever reason, the average ended up being about 4.5 months. So that's how we started to sort of project forward and be able to anticipate, okay, we're gonna have this many clients, we need to hire this many people, But even still, even if you are a 1-person business and you have clients out for the next, or you're like, I have work I can count on for the next 2 months, for example, I would still be, I don't know, a couple hours a week, still doing something to keep the pipeline full. Because what you can do then is when someone goes, I'd love to work with you, you go, great, I've got a wait list. I can start here in 60 days.
Yeah.
Like you would rather be in that position than 2 months from now going, uh-oh, my client's turn. Now I have to go find some more people.
Yeah. Yeah. And the power you get to say, I can start in 60 days. And also it's going to cost blank, which happens to be 30% more than my current rates or whatever. Like they can say no and it doesn't matter. Cool.
Yeah. And I think just one final thing there is I think, again, humans are very bad at extending the time horizon and understanding how compounding works. And one of the beauties of cold outreach is you have to realize that every person that you reach out to, even if they say no now, that doesn't mean no forever. So a lot of times the first year is the hardest because you're going from 0 to 1. You haven't talked to anyone yet, right?
Yeah.
But then year 2, you're going to have a bunch of, you're not only are you continuing to do cold outreach, but then you have a bunch of people from last January who are like, you know what, we have the budget now. They randomly show up in your inbox. They're like, hey, remember we talked a year ago? I have the budget now. I'd love to hire you. By year 3 or 4 or 5, right? By the time I was 5 years into 6 years into ghostwriting, like I didn't have to do as much cold outreach because every week people that I talked to 1, 2, 3 years ago would reappear and go, I'd love to work together again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you've got referrals and
you have
your own writing for yourself. It all just is a snowball. Yeah.
Yeah. The first year is the hardest, but if you can get into like year 2, year 3, and you're building yourself, well, now you have the cold outreach flywheel, you have your own content as a flywheel, you have all the people who said no before who might come back and say yes flywheel, and then you have the client referral flywheel.
Yeah.
You got business for days.
Yeah. And I think to build on that, like, because I coasted for so long in my business on just referrals, and I think a lot of freelancers do as well, and agency owners. So I think, like, to me, the part that I would highlight and underline from what you said is that not just get into year 2, not just survive a year, but get into year 2 on the back of a consistent outreach strategy or consistent marketing strategy, like a consistent, scary, out of your comfort zone thing where it's a lever you can pull to get freaking clients. Like that seems to be a huge part of this. Totally.
It's that is the one lever that you have the most control over.
Yeah. And it's the one that so many of us feel powerless about. So I think that's what's so cool about cold outreach. Awesome. Well, this has been just lovely. If the listeners listening and they want to check out your book, the little short link redirect thingy I made is dyf.link/something. Let me find it. I think it was ghostwriting book. Where the heck did I put this? I think it was ghostwriting book. That sounds like the kind of thing yeah, it is. So if you want to check out the art and business of ghostwriting, it's at dyf.link/ghostwriting book. And then what did you say the page was where I can learn more about your course and community?
Premium Ghostwriting Academy.com. It's a application survey. Takes 2 minutes.
Cool. And who's a good fit for that? Because presumably if a developer's listening, they probably shouldn't join the Premium Ghostwriting Academy. So is it people who want to get started as ghostwriter? They're already kind of doing scrapping it. They're a content writer who's thinking about ghostwriting. Like who's the ideal person to
Yeah, there's 2 archetypes. So one is you're an existing freelance writer in some way. And especially if you're on Upwork, or especially if you've been charging low rates, you can't figure out how to attract premium clients. You're interested in ghostwriting, which has some different nuances, and it is an industry where you can charge higher rates. That's one archetype. And then the second is someone who loves writing but is working a full-time job and either wants to have a high leverage, high profitability skill set that they can either do in addition to their full-time job, or they want to transition out of whatever they're doing and ghostwrite full-time. Those are the 2 archetypes that we really focus on.
So let's say I'm doing some content writing now on Upwork. I don't really like it, but I've heard that ghostwriting is blank. Do you want to smash some of the ghostwriting objections real quick before we go?
Yeah, it's the whole, first chapter in my book. It's
Yeah.
everything from people go, oh, ghostwriting is, I had a reporter one time call me and be like, I'm writing a piece about ghostwriting, and how do you feel helping people lie to the public? It's immoral. And I was like, you have this totally wrong. The thing to keep in mind with ghostwriting is you're not really ghostwriting. Ghostwriting is really just a different way of saying you're co-writing, because the people that you're working with, it's their thoughts, it's their stories, it's their insights. You're just the one helping them format it. You're the one helping remove all of the tangents that don't make sense. Like you're more of an assembler than you are I'm the one who's, the brilliant mastermind here. And so I think that's important to internalize. Ghostwriting just gives you access to incredible people.
Yeah. Yeah. And the beginning of the book is all about that. I love that. And I loved seeing your process for how you like to interview, get the transcript, turn that into the piece. I think a lot of really good stuff in there. So probably for anyone who's doing content right now, I would just say, check out the book before you dismiss ghostwriting, because I really think the approach he's taken is very, very cool. Awesome. Well, then I will hit stop, but we have to not hang up so that it can finish processing. But thank you, everyone who came live. Thank you so much, Cole, for your time and wisdom. This has been awesome. Thank you.
This is great. You asked some really good questions.
Great. Thank you. So if you're listening, it would always be appreciated if you like and subscribe. And not only would it be appreciated, it would actually benefit you, because if you like and subscribe and leave a good review, you'll get more helpful wisdom just like this. So that's a good CTA on my end. To get into Cole's ecosystem, again, it's dyf.link/ghostwriting-book. And then I think it was premiumghostwritingacademy.com. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Thanks, guys. I'm going to hit stop. Don't leave. See ya.